Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar. My name is Inga Buso. I am the technical co-lead under Plastics Pact and Plastic Reboot, and I'm joined today by my colleagues from both the Plastic Reboot team and Plastics Pact. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Greetings, everyone. Tyrese Roy, Communications Lead on Plastic Reboot.
Claire Pengeli, Project Manager for Plastic Reboot.
Good day, colleagues. I'm Serena Brooks, Project Officer on Plastics Reboot.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And before we get started, while we wait for more people to come in, I thought it would be important to just start with some housekeeping rules. So as we all know that this meeting is an external meeting, it will be recorded and it will be distributed to everyone who attended afterwards. We're also thinking of hosting it online, either on YouTube. So please keep your microphones muted at all times unless it is requested to speak. The camera is optional depending on how comfortable you are to be seen, and your bandwidth essentially. Please use the chat. You're welcome to introduce yourself and drop questions throughout the discussions. You can just drop in something. Ty, Claire, and the supporting people in the team will be able to answer you if I can't get to you first. And during our Q&A session, please use the raised hand feature to indicate that you would like to speak, and then we will unmute you. You may also, if we're going through the slides and the discussion, you have some questions, you can just drop them in, and whoever is a speaker will then answer you during the Q&A. And because we're working in a competitive space, I'll just take us through the competitive law statement. This is a pre-competitive space, and we're here to work towards solving shared problems in a non-competitive way. The competition law prohibits anything that allows collusion or restricts and prevents competition. Many of the people that are in the poll are competitors, so please make sure that no sensitive or price-related information is shared. So I'm going to ask everyone to be vigilant to ensure that we abide by all the competition rules. And again, as mentioned before, if there's anything that is said that concerns you or worries you, please drop it in the chat, or you can have the option to email me privately after the webinar. So let's just get started. I will be doing the welcome, and then Michael Newman from Returnity in the US will be the first speaker, followed by Chip Mariki Brown, who will be talking about the pallets and container pooling solutions that they have. And then lastly, we'll have Tom Field, who's based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. He is from CEO of Be a Hug, and he'll be talking about their reusable pallet wrap. And then I'll do the closing. And to start us off, to lay a foundation on why we're here today, this is a Plastic Reboot project. It is funded by UNIDO. The executive agent is WWF South Africa, and there are multiple national project partners that work in different components. We have the DFFE, CSIR, GreenCape, and ASIN working under different components and working with different stakeholders focused on different areas. The vision for Plastic Reboot is to contribute to South Africa's transition towards a thriving, equitable, and inclusive circular economy for plastic packaging and short-lived plastic products in the food and beverage sector. So not just plastic packaging, we have a specific focus on that, which would contribute to improved well-being for society and the environment. When I spoke about the different national projects, we have different components and they're all looking at different things. So if there's an area of interest that you might have, there are different people working on different things, WWF, ASIN, and GreenCape. GreenCape is the private sector engagement lead. We're working under component 3, where we're promoting the uptake of circular solutions in the food and bev plastic packaging value chain. And this is supported by the South African Plastics Pact. So GreenCape is also the Secretariat for Plastic Pact. And for those of you in the room who do not know what Plastics Pact is a voluntary initiative. It is a collaborative platform that drives innovation, dialogue, and collective action to create a circular economy for plastic packaging in South Africa. As mentioned before, it is facilitated by GreenCape as the Secretariat, and we bring together organizations from across the plastic value chain. We have funding members, we have business members, and we have supporting members. So on the value chain, we have recyclers to upwards to resin producers. We have supporting members like PROs, DFFE, and some universities, just to make an example. The Plastics Pact, we work towards 4 ambitious targets. Currently, we're working towards the 2030 targets, and these targets are closely in alignment with the targets and the vision for Plastic Reboot. So these projects work well together in synergy. And if you want to know more information about the South African Plastic Pact, we have a link, and Zarina will drop the link in the chat if you want any further information on the work that we do and how you can get involved or potentially become a member. And so we're here today for the scaling of reuse and refill in South Africa. So we're able to identify reuse as one area that can assist in decreasing single-use plastics. It can improve material efficiency and the transition to a more circular economy. And one way of looking at this is looking at best practices. We have an entire work stream that we've been working with the PACT members internally and externally as well. And one of the key objectives is to identify barriers to adoption of reuse and refill, and also to identify opportunities for adoption and how to impact at scale through individual and collective action. So on my right, possibly your right as well, we recently published a case study, and this case study primarily looked at refill and reuse in primary. It's okay. We looked at reuse and refill in primary. And this webinar is almost like an addition to that. So in our case study, we looked at local and global examples, but mostly local examples of refill and reuse in primary. And then this one, we specifically look at case studies in reuse and refill in secondary and tertiary. And this is all towards looking at best practices and increasing of adoption. The first step that we did, the conversation started for us last year in some of our conferences and then throughout this year as well. We got some key insights from the membership when we're looking at what are some of the barriers towards increase of refill and reuse in South Africa and for your own organizations. And some of the feedback and insights we got was that scale matters. If we're looking at impact and tonnages, scale will matter and how large the project is. Another insight that we received was that the current refill stations initiatives in store essentially have low uptake and are viewed as non-scalable and symbolic. One of an initiative was that the industry needs high impact solutions that meaningfully reduce packaging, and standardized containers was one of the key enablers that were strategized or we spoke about. When we again spoke about what are some of the barriers, we found out that some brands and retailers are worried about liability concerns, and we identified that unlocking local policy would be a great enabler. And so this is what we tried to answer, these questions that I mentioned before and these insights, we tried to address them within our reuse refill case study. And we're able to look and synthesize implementation insights from reuse and refill stations currently operating in South Africa. So we heavily focus on South Africa, and our aim is to unlock those barriers for the members and for the people that we spoke to. Secondly, we focused specifically on local operations. So what is working? What are the environmental factors that allowed for this initiative to work? And then we highlighted some practical options for scaling and optimizing reuse and refill systems in the food and bev sector. And then obviously in the case study, as mentioned before, we looked at all the different packaging tiers. So by packaging tiers, I mean primary, secondary, and tertiary. So we focus on primary, but then this is an opportunity to look further into secondary and tertiary. And these are just some of the features and case studies and people who were involved and who were featured in the case study that you'll find. And if you need any more further information and you want access to the case study, you can find it in the chat box. Serena will drop that in. And just to go through our agenda today, I mentioned that we have multiple stakeholders and multiple speakers today who will solely speak on the secondary and tertiary. Ty, I just want to ask, is Michael in? Okay, so I will start with Mariki and just give a brief intro on who Mariki is, and then she will take over. Mariki, you can start sharing the slides. So Mariki Brown is a sustainability and government affairs lead for the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa for CHEP, and is based out in Durban. She is responsible for achieving the Brambles 2030 goals for the region, customer engagement, employee empowerment, and partnering with external organizations. Mariki has a bachelor in science, a bachelor in honors, and a master's in philosophy. She started her career in corporate sustainability in the mixed sector of logistics, shipping, and banking, therefore, before moving to retail, which was involved in the value chain development. She is responsible for sustainable sourcing and corporate social responsibility, and she is passionate about the private sector and its ability to further human rights and planetary conservation goals.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Inga, for that introduction. Lovely to be here with you all today. Mariki Brown, representing CHEP. And let's get stuck right into it. So firstly, just to give you an overview of where CHEP fits in within the Brambles business. So Brambles is our overarching umbrella company. And you can see based on this map, those blue areas are all where Brambles operates. So really a global network that we represent here. And I'll be focusing in a little bit of what that means for us here in the southern tip of Africa. So looking specifically at our business here in sub-Saharan Africa, we serve over 3,000 customers, and we have close to 7,000 customer locations. And notably, we'll touch on the 18 timber farms that we own as well. There's millions of pallets within our pool. Within sub-Saharan Africa, we run 8 million pallets, and these are serviced through 78 centers across the country. One of the notable elements about the business within SSA is the backwards integration approach that we took. And what that plainly means is that we chose to own some timber farms as well as a sawmill to ensure that we have surety of supply and control of the quality of wood and the certifications that that wood has, to ensure that we produce the best quality pallet, own the best asset, and ensure that what we pull is of the highest quality. So looking a little bit into the detail of what those products are. What we're known for, top left-hand corner, is our extremely reliable pallet. But some of the things that I want to highlight here today is quite relevant to the conversation that we're having. So you'll see there's quite a few plastic products on that list. Our plastic bulk bins, our foldable bins, our quarter pallets, etc. So there's quite a few plastic assets within our stable. And what I want to highlight here that I think is very relevant for this conversation is that we've set a target by 2030 to ensure that 80% of the plastic within our assets is from recycled sources. And that, I think, really shows the commitment that we have to ensuring that we run alongside the best-in-class ambition of the world to ensure that we're not just taking care of the timber, but that we're engaging with how we deal with plastic as well. Getting back to the business, the strength and size of the service network is one of the key elements for us here in SSA and also globally. So there you can get a feel for how spread out this network is. And that's also notable for the conversation around sustainability, because the more service centers you have, the more you decrease those transport miles required to move your assets around. And that, of course, has the ability to step into your decarbonization goals, which is another element that CHEP and Brambles is very proud to be leading on globally. Getting into the detail here in South Africa of our 18 timber farms, we run them under the name Braycroft, and they're based around the southern Drakensberg area. So we have around 13,500 hectares of farmland that we own, with planting rights on approximately 7,800 hectares of that. So the remainder of the hectares is kept in a natural state. And we do quite a lot of environmental and biodiversity focused work around those open grasslands around the timber farms. And you can see behind me here an example from one of the projects that we run in the southern Drakensberg, where we work with Wildlife Act, who's one of our key partners in the biodiversity space, to ensure that we take care of the vulture population around the southern Drakensberg area. Taking a look down the supply chain at our weatherboard sawmill. We acquired this sawmill in 2015. So for the past 11 years, CHEP has been manufacturing its own pallets for its pool within SSA. So really a fundamental part of our strategy and our backwards integration to ensure that we have that reliability and predictability of the quality of our pallets, to ensure that what we present to our customers is always what we deem CHEP appropriate. Thinking of what goes into a pallet, this really is another differentiator for us. So we grow our pine trees for approximately 22 years. So that's a very long time commitment in order for us to get 7 pallets out of that tree. But in doing so, in committing for those 22 years, we know then that the wood that we get out of that pine tree is of A-grade quality. And again, it goes back to ensuring the strength and reliability of those assets. Thinking of the pooling model from a more overarching view, here we see how the entire supply chain fits together. It all starts in the forest, ensuring that we have sustainable timber and that absolutely not one piece of unregistered timber will come into our pallet production process. So all of our timber is sustainably sourced. And from there, our pallets are then manufactured within our sawmill. They are used, repaired, reused, and shared throughout our service network. We manage the equipment to ensure that it's best in class. We know where every pallet goes, and we can ensure that that is run extremely tight and very sustainably. This focuses on reducing the carbon footprint as well. Like I mentioned, that network of service centers is what really allows us to bring that carbon footprint right down. And at the end of its life, every single part of that pallet is recycled. The nails are all CHEP branded. We take them out, we recycle them. All of the pieces of the planks are separated and recycled. So after a long life of keeping the supply chain running, we ensure that no part of that pallet goes to waste. Now, thinking a little bit of our sustainability strategy. What is our North Star, the thing that we all focus on and that we strive towards? And that is to build the world's first global regenerative supply chain. That's a supply chain that consumes waste and creates value. And the only way this is possible is by working with a lot of other stakeholders. Every part of the supply chain we analyze, and we ensure that we are finding ways to add value. We are finding ways to consume waste, and we are finding ways to ensure that we are on this road to a truly regenerative supply chain. What this means for us in the practical sense is that we've set a set of extremely ambitious targets for our sustainability strategy for 2030. We focus on being nature positive, business positive, and communities positive. And what that means for us in practice is that we will have positive impacts within each of these spaces. Firstly, if we look at being nature positive, we have 3 key target areas there. The first being forest positive, and that is where our ambition is to regenerate 2 hectares for every 1 that is required for our timber needs. The second is how we step into the climate space. It's ensuring that we achieve our science-based targets and respond to any changes that we need to make with regards to adaptation and mitigation measures. And then lastly, the circular resources. That's the one that I mentioned up front, where we have an 80% net positive solutions for our waste ambition, as well as 80% virgin plastic substitution for our products. Looking at business positive, this is where we work with our customers, where we work within the supply chain and ensure that we have a positive impact both internally and externally to our business. On the community side, I think there could be some interest for some of our colleagues online here to know a little bit more about what we do within this space. And I would encourage you, if you have an interest in how we deal with communities and how we uplift the environment, to take a closer look at our CSR projects. We are doing some really fantastic work within the Southern Drakensberg, where we own our timber farms, and we're also engaging with species protection around Zululand. On top of that, what matters to us is to ensure that we step into the food positive space. And that is where we help to deliver millions of meals to people who need it the most through our partnerships with food banks and other organizations that distribute food. So with that, the end for my section today. I'd love to take any questions. If anyone has any questions on how we sit within the supply chain, what our sustainability strategy means, or anything else that comes up for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mariki. I really appreciate the extensive presentation and everything that you spoke about. Just to kick things off, while everyone thinks of their questions, always typing them, I just wanted to ask, and I know obviously that you have colleagues across the global south and the northern south and the northern parts, but I wanted to ask, does CHEP have any ambitions or works, or have they ever thought about working with plastic pallets?
So plastic pallets is something that we have investigated extensively. About 2 years ago, we ran quite a big test with one of our major customers in North America. And after years of testing together with them, it was found that within this case, the plastic pallet was not appropriate for use within the supply chain here. So at that point in time, we paused the plastic pallet work that we had been working on there. It doesn't mean that we'll never look at it. It doesn't mean we'll never approach it. But at this point in time, our reliable workhorse is still a timber pallet with some other products within the plastic space also sitting in our supply chain. So you'll see there is some mention of plastic pallets within our product brochure, but those are mainly used within the retail sector within stores. So those aren't really running through the supply chain, and they're more what we're seeing in store at the end of the supply chain.
There's a comment from Anton. He's asking, if pallets are being reused, does that mean that a reduction over time in the need for production of new pallets and therefore a reduction in the plantation footprint over time?
So that's a great question, Anton. Thank you so much for that. And there's a few things we need to balance within that equation. So firstly, yes, if you're starting from zero and you're building up your pallet pool, then you will get to a point where you plateau out your needs and you'll start reducing the amount of pallets that you generate if your customer needs and your customer base stays the same. There's a few things that we need to account for. So one is breakages. Pallets work very, very hard and forklifts are not always as accurate as we want them to be. So we do lose planks and parts of those pallets in their day-to-day life. Then they go to service centers and those parts that are broken get replaced. So it uses much less timber than replacing an entire pallet, but there is still a cycle happening of ensuring that the pallet is in top condition. So the other element is depending on how the supply chain is moving. When economic activity is very high, the supply chain moves faster and more pallets are running through more locations. As the economy sometimes slows down, as we see this happens every now and again, then there's slower movement, there's less need for new pallets, and so these needs balance out. So this is something that our procurement team globally is always watching, always keeping an eye on, because also we need to ensure that when we do need to get new pallets into our global pool, that we can ensure we get sustainably sourced wood with FSC or PEFC certification. So definitely an interesting question and something that we keep a balance on at all times.
Last question. Just one more question, and I'm trying to think, trying to keep time in mind, but there's one more question from Tilly, and she's asking, are there any plans of moving tip from to other parts of Africa and not just the southern tip?
Absolutely. So CHIP Sub-Saharan Africa works up to around Zambia, but then through our Middle Eastern business, Middle East and Turkey, we also work within Northern Africa. So that's where we've identified at this point in time the need for a pooling partner. And we also respect that in different parts of the world, and specifically in different parts of Africa, the supply chain moves differently. So it's not always appropriate to be a pooler within different supply chains. It completely depends on the need of the customers within those spaces, but we are certainly servicing our customers within Sub-Saharan Africa as well as in Northern Africa.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mariki. We have a question from Kirsten, but I would like to encourage you to answer her in the chat because of the time and we need to introduce a new speaker. So Kirsten was asking about the socioeconomic assessment replacement. And so I think that you can answer that in the chat and everyone will also be able to see it. So I would like to move in and introduce our next speaker. Tom, if you are ready, can you please share your slides? And I'll do the introduction as you share.
Can do. Hi, everyone.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction of who Tom is, and then he will share his presentation. So Tom Field is the founder of Beer Hug, an Australian company replacing single-use pallet wraps with reusable alternatives. After years as a frustrated truck driver securing palletized goods with stretch film, he commercialized a mesh-based product that can be applied, removed, and reapplied over 1,000 times. Tom is leading Beer Hug across multiple functions. He has delivered successful reusable packaging pilots with major FMG companies, developed new textile and robotic productions to meet performance requirements across various scenarios and markets. 3 years on from Beer Hug's inception, Tom has recently relocated to Amsterdam amidst European PPWR regulation, establishing a minimum reuse rates for transport packaging. So Tom, you can take it away.
Thanks very much. And yeah, it's great to speak after CHEP, and thanks for that presentation, because that was really the inspiration for starting Bear Hug in the first place. As you mentioned, I spent a few years as a truck driver, sort of tearing off single-use stretch wrap from the pallets I was delivering every single day. And whilst doing that in Sydney, sort of delivering beer everywhere I went, I'd see the same blue CHEP pallets everywhere. And, you know, just been new to the industry, fresh out of high school, it was very interesting to see there was so much cohesion behind a reusable solution for pallets. But we were still stuck in the single-use practice for securing goods onto those pallets. So the context and the mission behind Bear Hug is to solve the 1.5% of global plastic waste that single-use stretch wrap accounts for. There's about as many pallets in the world as there are people, and 350 grams goes along with every pallet you wrap. So you can sort of make sense of how it gets to that level of scale. The starting point for us was that there is an existing solution already on the market when Bear Hug launched, the reusable pallet wrap. It's a PVC-based mesh that lasts 1,000 reuses rather than obviously just the one use and throw away. And so over that lifespan, it can help a business avoid 350 kilograms of LLDPE soft plastic waste. And that the wrap itself only really weighs 3 kilograms. So quite a difference there when they're fully utilized. And from the cost perspective, 100 reuses until they reach the financial break even on average for a product that can be used 1,000 times. So the obvious thing when we launched Bear Hug and took this existing product to market in Australia was that it's not going to get to any serious level of impact without systemic innovation. So the two obvious barriers to reaching, avoidance of the 5 million tons of pallet wrap used globally is, number one, most warehouses in the world will apply plastic automatically, and there is no automated solution that currently exists for applying reusable pallet wraps. And the second obvious barrier is that they're only currently suitable for closed loops or internal use. So company A can't send a reusable wrap to company B because they don't want to lose it. And so that's basically where Bear Hug sits. We've commercialized the reusable wrap manually applied in closed loops. We noticed these challenges and are now near completion of a working prototype, the world's first automated machine for applying reusable pallet wraps. And just to sort of capture the benefits of reuse, that's something that only revolves around the load once rather than the 10 to 15 times you need to spin a pallet to properly secure it with plastic. So that's a huge benefit we hope to be able to deliver to warehouses and FMCG customers soon. And the second piece is the world's first pooling system for reusable pallet wraps. So that is something we've already piloted in Australia with 16 brewers and distribution companies on board in that system. And we are in an ongoing pilot with Coca-Cola and Metcash, one of the largest supermarket groups in Australia. As for sort of the path of what we've achieved in the 3 years we've been on market, 180 customers that span across all forms of FMCG, manufacturing, distribution, warehousing, in all subsectors. Collectively, our customers have saved just over 30 tonnes of soft plastic, and that's something that we're hoping to accelerate quite a lot over the coming months, because initially we were focused on the niche of craft brewing. And recently we've branched out to get new customers on board, like Amazon, this trial with Coca-Cola, Kmart and McDonald's, just launching trials now as well. Along that path as well, from starting in Sydney, we saw PPWR regulation come about in Europe that initially was forcing a transition to reusable pallet wrapping, but now is more sort of broadly reusable transport packaging mandates. So yeah, 2 months ago, I moved from Sydney to Amsterdam to launch our European presence. And between launch and between now, we also dipped our toe in the American market, launching in the US about a week before Trump's tariffs came in. So that was a bit of a short-lived one, but we still managed to get 20 customers on in the US and managed to understand quite a bit about what makes the reuse market tick in the US versus other countries. So just to look quickly at the financials, case for reusables in the context of pallet wrapping. So this is in a 2-day reuse cycle, so relatively high throughput, which is what we target for most customers. A company buys a reusable pallet wrap for €100 a piece, if we're speaking in euros here. They reuse that over 1,000 times, and they have a slight reduction in their handling time. And so they're getting a cost reduction of about 80 euro cents versus what they'd be paying for single use. And one thing that's often omitted from the case of single use is that you've got the logistics cost of ordering it and getting it into your warehouse. You've got the logistics cost of sending it off to disposal or recycling in some cases. And you've got the added handling time of having to bale the plastic and facilitate those processes. So when you're having to get something in and out of your warehouse with regularity, such as with single use, there's a cost that's incurred there. When you can keep a reusable asset within your own possession, there's benefits. And when we move into our pooling system, the economics are slightly different. You've got a cost involved in inbound and outbound for receiving and sending those reusable wraps in some cases, but it's generally around parity with the cost of single use. As for the environmental case, so for us, we were lucky that there's an existing life cycle assessment that's actually done by Brambles, Cisco, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and a number of other trustworthy businesses. And so when we launched, we didn't really have to focus on material innovation and data. We had to focus on the systemic barriers and overcoming the barriers to get the solution in customers' hands. So what we've seen from this report, and we'll be preparing our own life cycle assessment with new materials over the coming months. But when a reusable wrap is used over its 1,000 reuse life, it can result in a break-even of the CO2 emissions embedded in the materials after just 19 uses compared to hand-applied LLDPE. And that also factors in a 50-kilometre return trip after each use of a reusable pallet wrap. So that was quite early justification that our pooling system is environmentally viable, even with the current materials available. provided they're getting sufficient reuses over their life. So just to step back about our journey and what we've found in the sort of different markets. One of the reasons we moved over to Europe from Australia was sort of feedback from the biggest players in the retail sector that they want to see proof of concept before really testing any solution. And in Australia, we have the dominance of just a few supermarket groups and retailers. And so what that meant for us is you can't really get proof of concept in Australia for a new large-scale pooling system, because they need to function at scale for them to function properly. And so that's one of the key reasons for us moving to Europe, as well as the sort of difference in the regulatory landscape. So in Australia, the recent changes that Scope 3 emissions reporting is now mandated. That means that companies need to look at their waste and their transport emissions, but it doesn't really effectively mean they have to do anything. And so we haven't really seen a change in behaviour with recent regulatory changes in how companies approach sustainability. What we found in the US and what we heard from a lot of other businesses trying to scale in the US is, especially in California, there's progressive regulation that's in favour of businesses like ourselves, but enforcement is limited. And that's even something we've found in Europe as well, is that small and medium companies can often slip under the radar. But what we're going off here in Europe is that the compliance and the enforcement is a bit tighter. And so we're seeing larger companies that actually are moving quickly when regulation is on the horizon. As well as that, in the US, there's a deep-rooted convenience culture. So I was amazed to see single-use plastic cups being served at bars. And even from walking into warehouses of potential customers in the US, actually seeing reusable pallet wraps and reusable solutions already in use. And so what I think that sort of taught me is that it's less about a consumer and a business difference there in the US. It's just convenience culture. If there's a system that you want to install at a bar, the simple thing of just using glasses and washing them takes a little bit of extra time rather than throwing them away. So people aren't going to invest that effort. But if there's a product that saves you a bit of time in the warehouse, people will commit to that. On the European side, it's exciting to see from the first few months here that sustainability is a general or genuine commercial driver. Whereas in other markets, we'll talk to individuals who are interested in a solution because they value sustainability and innovation. But when it comes to writing a check, it doesn't make a difference. What we're finding here is that companies are willing to move to a trial quickly without having too much regard for the business case. They don't want to see plastic in their warehouse, is the simple way to put it. And what I briefly mentioned there, for what unifies what we've found across these different markets, is that people have an innate appreciation for newness and innovation. And so with reusable systems like this and with innovation like this, it's quite easy to get in the right rooms. But companies often fear the risk of adoption, and the person who's pushing this new solution in a company may have their job on the line if we're not providing some cap on the sort of adoption risk, if we're not sort of minimizing the negative consequences of losing 100 wraps or something along those lines. As well as that, when we've looked at sort of material cost being our biggest value proposition, companies definitely have a preference for efficiency over material cost reductions. Ultimately, the payback has to come within a few years for something that lasts 5 or 6 years. But companies have really turned their head at things that sort of improve the efficiency of their operations. People are happy for a relatively slow payback as long as they don't have to hire someone new to implement a system like this. As well as that, we've spent quite a lot of time trying to get density of our pooling system in the craft beer industry in Australia. And I think we achieved some level of that, with 95 of our customers in Australia being brewers. But in launching a reuse system, the industry that it's launched in needs to be very well selective, because a lot of resources go into getting adoption within that market. But you're not really intending to be profitable in the near term with reusable and pooled system. It takes a long time, and you don't want to have to pivot to new ones. So just a quick touch point on why we've come to Europe is the PPWR packaging regulation. So from January 2030, 40% of transport packaging used for transport between different countries or between different companies within the EU must be reusable. And so that doesn't mean that companies have to use reusable pallet wrapping, but it means that we are able to help businesses meet their targets and meet that mandate as a sort of system alongside their reusable pallets and other reusable transport packaging. So to round off just with the keys that we've found for launching and scaling a reuse system, number one is just to get something low risk, but as broad as possible in use. For us, it's great because we can sell the wraps into closed loops into multiple industries to understand sort of the needs of the entire market, which may not be the case for other solutions. But as you come across new subcategories with different needs, it changes the system at a cost, obviously. For us, that cost is reworking the wraps that we started with to the new design. But I guess it's great that we've got the sort of dual approach of being able to run a return or a pooling system, as well as just being able to sell wraps outright and learn from different industries. As well as that, something I think we should have focused on from the start is just innovating in the ease of use and making sure that the manual application of our products is as simple as possible, because that's generally the biggest drop-off point for trials is if it's not a simple training, and that will be a lesson that's applicable for reusable cup schemes at restaurants or any other system. It's got to be based around convenience is definitely what we learned in the US. As well as that, which may feed into sort of how we're following this path, is that collaboration is absolutely key. For us, we launched with a partnership with a transport company that allowed us to test our solutions and led to us getting several of their customers as our own. For innovating in the ease of use, we're now releasing a new range that's just far simpler to understand from the first point of a customer receiving the product. And in terms of collaboration, we've sort of got to this stage of having pretty much a working prototype for this automated wrapping machine. And so we're now part of a robotics lab that's going to support us with getting it sort of ready for market and allow us to outsource parts of that development to companies that are more capable than the small team that we are. And I guess in launching a reuse system, probably the most important thing is what you choose not to do. For us, that was ignoring setting up robust cleaning and other infrastructure. And that became a part of market selection. We haven't really operated in the fresh produce industry, despite it being very high reuse rates and very appetizing in some senses. It would have meant we have to set up cleaning infrastructure, which is tough for starting something new. Something we chose not to do is enforce our terms of service strictly, which is something that a business of the size of CHEP has to do absolutely to ensure loss rates are viable. But for us, in early stages of starting a new system, it's got to be based around convenience and reducing risk. So in the proof of concept phase, enforcing penalties can be worth avoiding. As well as that, for us, it was the overdevelopment of software because there's sort of existing solutions already out there. And this will obviously be different for different businesses. Cleaning is probably the key innovation in some systems. But for us, it's the automation and the product and the building the network between businesses. So yeah, thanks everyone for the time. There's my email below in case anyone wants to contact, and looking forward to any questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tom. Just to be conscious of the time, I would just encourage you to do the same thing that we did with Mariki. If anyone has questions, I encourage Tom to sort of like answer through the chats so that everyone can see it because we have one more speaker. And I also encourage everyone to reach out beyond this and start those connections and partnerships and collaborations. It'll be really great to hear what comes out of these webinars. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tom. Michael. Michael, can you please share your slides while I do your introduction?
Absolutely.
So I'd like to introduce Michael Newman. Michael is the CEO of Returnity, where he builds logistic tools designed to improve efficiency across last mile delivery, returns, retail operations. He leads the development of the Last Box, a durable shipping and returnable packaging solution built to replace inefficient cardboard for workflows with standardized infrastructure at scale. With more than 20 years of experience across operations, policy, and sustainability, Michael has helped build national scale recovery and logistics programs for leading brands. He holds an MBA from the University of Michigan and lives in Brooklyn, New York City. Michael, please let me know if you're struggling with your slides. I do have them my side and we can share those for you.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm having some security challenges getting permission, so apologies for that.
No worries, we'll share from our side.
Great, and I have a very short presentation. I figured I'd leave plenty of time if people had questions. So I will dive right in. Thank you for having me and thank you for that introduction. As you heard, I've been working on this sort of challenge for quite a while, almost 10 years at Returnity and quite a lot longer in other businesses working on reuse and how to get things back once they're done being used by whoever received it. Mobile phones, almost 8 years as well. And really that is the big key for reuse is like reuse is great if you get it back. And often it's worse if you don't. In fact, what I say is that reuse is worse until it's better is a way to think about it. So like when you first start reusing a product, it's actually going to be worse for the planet, more environmentally and economically problematic unless you can keep using it a lot. And using it a lot is in most settings means like 90 to 95% return rates are higher. Anything below that, and you're almost certainly making the problem worse. And that's incredibly difficult to do in a consumer setting, as probably you all know. So, so that is a big organizing driver around my work and Returnity's work, is how do we make reuse actually effective and not just a really good talking point or a concept that we want to promote, but something that really works in the real world. I should also add that I'm a huge fan of the pacts, and I'm now the board chair for the US Plastics Pact, and really appreciate all the work that everyone is doing in this effort. So, all right, well, why does Returnity focus on corrugated boxes? They're expensive. You know, it's not just economically expensive. From what I found, there's over 500 million used for parcel shipments just in South Africa every year. It's, you know, billions and billions of corrugated boxes globally every year, which requires millions of trees. And you also have to tape them and fill them with dunnage. So, you know, for content protection, they're not very efficient from a labor standpoint, which is not something that people often think about. But when the box is received, particularly in a business context, well, also in a consumer context, to cut it open, take the products out, cut it up, break it down. In a store, you're trying to consolidate all of them. It's actually quite labor inefficient. It's also hated by employees. If you ever ask a retail employee how they feel about corrugated and unboxing and breaking down boxes, they'll tell you it's one of their least favorite parts of their jobs. But it's quite inefficient from a labor standpoint. And then, you know, boxes are great except for when they aren't. One sort of unknown reality of retail shipping, in particular business shipping, is that companies will pick high quality boxes when they do e-commerce because they want that customer to have like a really great unboxing experience. But the boxes they buy to ship to their stores and the tape they buy to close those boxes is like the cheapest thing they can find, because consumers don't see it and they don't see any reason to spend an extra penny. But what the carriers, DHL, FedEx, everybody will tell you is that those boxes like break up a lot, you know, in shipping. And so they actually lead to product loss because they'll break open or they'll have water get into them. And product loss is an enormous economic loss and an environmental loss, right? You put all the development into that product, then you don't get to sell it. So there's a reason why cardboard is dominant today, but it actually has a lot of downsides to it as a product, and it's why we've focused on it as a reuse opportunity. So Go to the next slide, if you would, please. So we focus on B2B. We started out doing B2C, but what we found is that you just don't get it back nearly often enough. In fact, the number of companies who are doing B2C reuse in logistics keeps going down every year, despite regulatory pressure in some markets and attention from companies, because it's just too expensive to get them back one at a time, and you don't actually get them back from consumers anywhere close to often enough. So we focused on B2B, and there's a lot of reasons why, as you've heard from other presenters, why B2B offers a lot of advantages. First of all, like, there's consistent logistics segments. So like, if you're a retailer, you have a distribution center, you have a store, you're sending products from point A to point B all the time. So it's easy to establish a different workflow there. Their employees, you can train them, you can hold them accountable. If their job process is that you take the reusables and you ship them back, that's what they're held accountable to. And so it's easy to keep them in circulation at very high levels. You can do it a much more efficient way. So you can consolidate with shipping packaging. Shipping one empty reusable package back at a time is incredibly expensive. Shipping a box of boxes, which is how our products work, now you've consolidated, you have one parcel that has 11 total reusable boxes. The costs become much more competitive when you can do it that way. We already talked about how, like, employees really hate using cardboard. It's really, it becomes very popular immediately once stores put this in place. And then they're waterproof. They're actually stronger than corrugated. So reuse in a business-to-business context just has all these operational and economic and sort of product protection advantages. But, and we'll go to the next slide. There's a lot of caution as well to be, oh, sorry, I had two more slides. Yeah, so this is our box, just to kind of brag on it for a moment. We make them custom to retailers' requirements, so whatever their dimensions are today. But it's a plastic box. It replaces corrugated. That makes some people uncomfortable because it's going from fiber to plastic. And, you know, that's the reality. So plastic replacing fiber is problematic unless it isn't. In this context, it isn't, because after millions and millions of shipments, what we've proven is that these boxes will last 50 uses on average. So you're replacing 50 cardboard boxes, and making 50 cardboard boxes is actually quite environmentally damaging. So this box offers all those other advantages. One big thing that we've been able to do is collaborate with FedEx, and they've actually certified our boxes. The first time any carrier has done this globally, is to automatically identify reusables in their system and offer specialized rates and contracts to customers who make this switch. So in the business context, that's been really powerful, because now the FedEx team globally is selling in this service. We've already got clients in the US and EU, APAC. So it sort of demonstrates a new approach to deploying reusables. Now, the last slide, if you would, please. So here's the integration challenge to be aware of. So we got this really cool box. We've been working on it for 10 years. We're very proud of it. But there's still a lot of headwind to be aware of. So one major trend in logistics, of course, is automation, whether it's carton erectors, automatic taping, automatic labeling, robots that pick up the boxes and palletize them automatically. That's the trend line. Depending on how retailers and businesses are implementing those technologies, the packaging may or may not work well with it. And that's just going to become more commonplace every year. So reuse has to keep up with all those other trends from an infrastructure standpoint. You also have this issue where most companies are using lots of different carriers, depending on what they're shipping, when they're shipping it, and where they're shipping it. And not all of them are prepared to or want to handle this material. In fact, most carriers today who are handling cardboard boxes will penalize you if you're using something that isn't cardboard. It's not just that they won't give the the advantages that FedEx is now offering. It's that they built their entire systems around cardboard and single use, and so and for frankly good reason. I mean, here in the U.S., FedEx tells us that they have 50 million shipments a year where people bring them a tire and put a label on it and say, "Here, ship my tire," from one location to another. So these systems are so high speed now, these modern parcel networks, that they can't risk a thing on the network damaging it and getting caught or shutting down a line because it wasn't compliant. They know cardboard is compliant. If it isn't cardboard, they don't know, and they may take it off the line and do special handling. That adds costs. So incumbent systems are built for cardboard, and that can cause problems. Some sectors, reuse, frankly, just doesn't really work, particularly in this sort of secondary parcel shipment. If it is in a healthcare or a food application, there's probably government cleanliness, sterilization standards, and reusables. There are reusables that work for that, like grocery deliveries, in those plastic trays and things like that. But that is when they're palletized and go on a truck on a dedicated truck route. What I'm talking about is that intermediary where it might be shipping through DHL or UPS or somebody. And to engineer a product that can survive that kind of logistics segment, but then also be sterilized is quite expensive and difficult. So it isn't often a good fit for those applications, and single use ends up being the better choice. And then you have all these now competing requirements for stores. They are both traditional store purpose, where you're shipping products to stores, they're putting it on the shelf, customers come in and buy it. But now increasingly people buy things online and then they're shipped to the store where you then go and pick it up. Or maybe the store ships some of the items to the store, but picks other items from the shelves and they combine them for you. As stores become more complex and become little mini operation and logistics hubs, how products are packaged and moved is much more complex. So it's not the world it was before. You can't just say, well, let's go reuse. It's easy. It's harder and harder every day. You have variability in what sizing you need, and that can add inventory challenges. And then finally, as you've heard from other speakers, the regulatory environment is complicated. So some states are banning, or some countries or some regions are banning some products, but not others, or offering incentives or not. And if you're a retailer, a global retailer in particular, that's the worst. You hate having to try and align across lots of different regulations. So it tends to slow things down in many ways, not actually speed them up, because you don't want to invest in one solution that won't be approved in other and different locations. One very quick example is here in the States, where now 7 of the 50 states have extended producer responsibility laws. And they're all different. And California has theirs now. California, being the biggest economy, tends to dominate the conversation. They have gone with the let's get rid of plastic approach. So companies actually are disincentivized to go from single-use fiber to reusable plastic, even though the model is proven to work quite well, because the regulation is intended to move people off of plastic. So companies are sticking with single use instead of going to reuse, because that's what the regulation is sort of written around. And if you're a national retailer, you don't just ship to California, of course, you ship everywhere. So you have to kind of navigate through all that complication. So this is my sort of cold water part of the conversation, which is to say, it seems obvious. Cardboard, single use, let's do it in reusable. It's not always that obvious. And frankly, it's often not going to be a great fit. And I think that's the challenge for businesses, for activists, for regulators, is not trying to adopt this one size fits all thinking. It won't. You have to be focused and you have to be realistic, and reuse can be great in some areas, and it's just not going to be a good fit in others, or at least not today, and better to focus on where it can work and build from success. So that's my presentation. Appreciate this, and if there's time for questions or in the chat.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. I'm just going to give a second for anyone who has one question to raise their hands or put anything in the chat. And as we wait for those hands to show up, or for anyone to put anything in the chat, I think I'll just do a closing because we're right on time. So I want to take a moment to thank all the speakers for today. Thank you, Mike, Mariki, and Tom. I really appreciate the different perspective that came into this conversation, both local and global. I like the insights that came with what are the enabling conditions that allow reuse to happen in the secondary and tertiary. I liked the lens of legislation, take into consideration the PPWR, the local conditions of EPR, and just looking at best practices and lessons learned throughout the journey. And so I just want to encourage everyone to sort of like continue the conversation and keep it moving. And then lastly, a way forward from our side is that we are working towards continuing scaling and putting the best practices out there. The next sector that we're moving into while we're still working with reuse is reuse models in the food and bev industry and hospitality. And so this is just a moment to let everyone know in the meeting and in the webinar that that is the area they'll be looking into, hospitality. And so if you know anyone whose sustainability goals are closely aligned with where we're trying to move towards, or if you know anyone who's doing anything cool or innovative in this space, in hospitality, specifically for food services and beverage industry, that would be really, really great. And then by next year, we're hoping to facilitate pitch events where reusable solution providers can present reuse models to potential food and service hospitality clients. But I feel like this is the first step, and I would like to keep the conversation going. If there's any speaker today that spoke and you'd like to get in contact with or continue the conversation going, you can email me and I'll get you in touch if you didn't get a chance to get their details. The slides, the presentation, and the recording obviously will be shared to everyone who was here today. And yeah, thank you to everyone. And I appreciate getting the time to join us today.